Hey everyone, last night I got a comment from somebody who wants to take their OPZ output, record just the drums out of the right channel into their mixer, and just the synths out of the left channel into their mixer. The problem is that they've gone through the LFOs, they see that there's no LFO that's affecting panning, and yet they're still hearing some of the drums in the synth track and some of the synths in the drum track. All of this despite the fact that they've also muted tracks 9 through 16. So they've muted the effects tracks, they've muted the tape track, all that stuff. So what is going on? Well, I have a pretty good idea, but first I just want to show you how I would first start off by troubleshooting this on a pattern of mine if I wanted to accomplish this from scratch. First thing I'm going to do is just briefly play the pattern so that you know kind of what we're hearing, what I'll be working with in this video. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, the first thing I would probably do is I would go through each of these tracks and I would see if I can find an LFO that affects the pan. The way that I would do that is I would go to parameter page 3, and because I have the option on where it doesn't reset the parameter page when I change tracks, I'm able to just touch this third encoder. Okay, that's affecting 8, which I know is the volume. I'm looking for 7, which I know is panning. Snare track, also 8. Hi-hats, also 8. Bass, though, does affect 7. So if I wanted to really isolate these tracks, I would have to take that automation or take that modulation off of the panning. And so in this case, I'm just going to move it to the filter and make it way less drastic. Now I'll keep searching, and okay, that one's not on panning. So we just had that one on panning. The second thing I'll say you check is go to the master track, because I just made this mistake, and make sure that chorus, that first encoder, is all the way counterclockwise. Otherwise it will have a stereo effect and you'll be able to hear all the instruments in both channels, at least some part of them. But now that we've got that sorted out, let's go ahead and pan our tracks just like this commenter had. So I'm going to go to the kick track. I'm going to go to the 4th parameter page and I'm going to adjust this third encoder. I'm going to make the kick, I'm going to turn it all the way clockwise to make the kick all the way to the right, snare all the way to the right, hi-hat all the way to the right, oops, hi-hat all the way to the right, bass track all the way to the left, and the chords track all the way to the left. So we now should be in a similar situation to this commenter. One more change, of course, is that we're going to have to mute all of those tracks. But it's still not going to sound quite as we want. You will still be able to hear some bleed between the two. Let me play it. If you're curious where this is coming from, you can hold down track and you can see these LEDs light up to tell me where audio is coming out of these tracks. And so our culprits are actually FX1 and FX2. But those are muted, right? The problem is that on the OPZ there's 2 types of mutes. One type of mute, which we have enabled here, turns off all MIDI and notes from that channel. So for example, with the hi-hat track, that's also the case for that. But if I were to play a note on the hi-hat track, you could still hear it. On the other hand, if I applied a audio mute to the hi-hat track by holding down mixer, hitting shift, and then hitting the hi-hat track, suddenly we can't hear it. And that's because there's a difference between that MIDI type of muting and then the audio muting. And the effects tracks, you're basically going to want to stick with the audio muting because the notes on these tracks don't make much of a difference. So what I would do in this case is instead of doing a regular mute, I would just put my mute on both of those effects tracks. So let's hear what it sounds like now. Not as lively, but it definitely sounds like we've got a split between our drums and our synth tracks, which is exactly what we wanted, and I'm not hearing any bleed. So I'm going to go ahead and then just unmute the remainder of these. I think this probably solves this commenter's problem, but there's a couple other things that you might run into that I want to mention. One is that if you're using the effects track at all for any effects, you might end up with a bit of that bleed because there are a couple stereo effects. So for example, I don't have these memorized, so just give me a second, but actually I'll just do it on the chords track here. So I'm going to, I think there's a pan sweep and I think that there's a stereo effect. So let's listen for those. Okay, I can hear it in both channels now with this one. Okay, so maybe it's not, maybe one of those, like maybe the pan sweep one is a group one. I don't know. But my point is that you want to check the performance track, which is track 13, and make sure there's no notes here, because that could be your issue if you're running into this problem. You could also be dealing with the tape track. The tape track could be sending to effects, and that might be messing with you. Of course, that wouldn't be an issue if you have the effects tracks muted, but I'm just saying that's another layer you might overlook. And then the last thing is if you have any external MIDI that affects the panning of any of these tracks, or maybe even affects the LFO, or maybe you have another device that's sending MIDI and you don't realize it's sending it to the relative channel on the OPZ, this can all affect the panning. So that's kind of how I would handle the troubleshooting. I think most people are going to run into this issue here because I know I did quite a bit. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned that this commenter also wants to be able to send 2 more mono tracks out of the line module. And there's something a little tricky about that, but thankfully it's not that hard. The way I would do this is, let's say that in this case, I want to send out the snare and the bass out of that line module because I want to record them separately. I would open up my I/O track, or track 14, there we go, and I would hold Shift. And here I would say, okay, I want my snare to go out of there, and did I say I want bass? Yeah, let's just say bass. Now it will send these out of the line module, but I'll still hear them in the rest of the mix. And that's because the dry level is set to the max. The way that you adjust that is holding down track and changing this 4th encoder counterclockwise till it's off. Now those are totally out of the mix. And the good news is that the OPZ applies the panning and the volume before it sends it out of the line out. So we already have these panned into 2 different mono outputs with the drums, the kick in this case, or the snare in this case, still on the right, and the bass on the left. Okay, that's all that I had to cover about that. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know if you have any questions on this, or if you're running into any similar issues and you can't quite figure out what's going on based off of the advice I've given here. But again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.